So now we'll look at this scatter plots, especially when we are more interested in finding the relationship between two variables, or we are more interested in doing some kind of a regression relationship between two, a regression equation between the two variables. Knowing one variable, I can predict the other kind of stuff. I can create a kind of a scatter plot. Scatter plot is simply talking about when one value is growing, is the other value growing or falling accordingly. So it's more like how two variables are moving together. So let's say in this case, just to illustrate that, I was thinking of taking the list of all the players. For the entire list of players, I need to unprotect this sheet. For the entire list of players, this is the entire list of players whom we had. Let me just create a space for them. Alright, so for this entire list of players, I would like to see their average as well as their strike rate. And I would like to see whether there is some kind of relationship between their average and the strike rate for each of the players. So to accomplish that, average again, as the way we have found out earlier, the runs, right? I need the runs, I need the number of matches which do not contain not outs and which contain only the outs. And for the computation of the strike rate, I need the number of balls faced. So for all of them, I would like to compute all that stuff using our same sum ifs kind of functions itself. So I am saying sum ifs. So I want to sum up for all these people. I want to sum up, let's say, their total runs, where the person name, this is the person name, equal to this person, and person name equal to this. I think that itself is sufficient, because I want the total runs scored by each of these players. I would like to compute their average, and after that I would like to see their strike rates. Alright, so I am computing the total runs. So this is what is the total runs which each of these guys have scored in their total career, right from the first person to the last. Similarly, I am trying to find out number of matches they are out. So this I can use count ifs, which we have used in the morning. So I am doing the count ifs where I am putting the criteria. One is the player name column equal to the player name. Then the run scored not equal to DNB. Only there I am counting. And even the outs column, which is the status column, is equal to out. Only when these three conditions are met, I am trying to find out how many matches he has played. So these are the number of matches for each of these players. So these are the number of matches. And based on this, I can find out his average by dividing this number by this number. I am getting the average of this person. Alright. I am getting the average of this person. Now I want the number of balls faced. So the number of balls faced, I will sum up the whole balls column for this player. So again I will do sum if. This time I want to sum up the range wise. I want where the player name is equal to this. Do the summation of the total ball spaced. Oh, ball spaced, is it there? Yeah, ball space, the D column. So based on this, I will arrive that these are the number of balls he has spaced. Each person, I can get some kind of computation on the number of balls he has spaced. Based on this, I can arrive at his strike rate, where I am saying the total runs divided by the number of ball space. Probably I will multiply it with 100 also to arrive at his strike rate. So this is the strike rate for this person. And similarly, I can go down to find out the strike rate of everyone. Now I would like to see if there is any kind of a relationship existing between the average and the strike rate. Probably the people who have high average have high strike rate and vice versa. Low average and a low strike rate. I want to see that kind of a relationship by taking this as the sample. For this entire data, I want to check out that kind of a relationship. So in those kind of cases, I would simply depend on going for a scatter plot. Two variables, relationship between the two variables, I would like to go for a scatter plot. Right? Okay, so now in this case, I want to go between average and strike rate. I want to go for a scatter plot between the two, so that in future, probably if I have to project, okay, if this person's average is somewhere in this range, what is the expected strike rate for this person? If at all there is a relationship between the two, first of all we need to see whether there is a significant relationship between the two, or probably I could have done between average and run scored. The higher the run scored, probably higher will be the average, or vice versa. If I have some kind of notions regarding that, I can test out the relationship between two variables using a simple scatter plot. The moment I see that my scatter plot is going up, there is a positive relationship between the two variables, or a negative relation. If it is coming down, I see that there is a negative relation between the variables. And if it is flat, I can very well say that there is literally no relationship between the variables. Now let's try to do that plotting. So I'll go for insert and I'll go for a scatter plot. Okay, I'm going for a basic scatter plot. Right, it has taken some kind of values. Let me ignore those. Now, in the select data, I am simply going with removing whatever the things which it has taken. It has taken the whole table and it is plotting something. Right, this is not what we wanted. So each of these probably I can, so the entire thing is removed. Now, as a part of the data, I am adding an entry. So here I am saying the scatter plot is between average versus strike rate. This is what is my scatter plot. Average versus strike rate. Now I am putting what I want to take it on the x-axis. Let's say average is what I want to take on the x-axis. Right, okay, I'll take the averages on the x-axis and strike rates I'll take on the y-axis. Okay, now we are seeing that there is literally no relationship. If we see here, literally the graph is, because there are so many elements for us, literally the graph, though it is showing some kind of an uppish trend, right? If I try to plot, right, if I try to probably let's rename it, or let's change the chart type to contain the first part, which is slightly simpler to interpret. So it does not actually contain that joining of all the points. It just plots out all the points. Probably what we are observing is there is some kind of an uppish move or some kind of a curvish move in the data. Right? So to just see if there is some kind of relationship between the average on the x-axis and the strike rate on the y-axis, I can get into this layout where I can go for a trend line. The trend line will actually tell me whether there is any kind of a trend between the two, whether there is some kind of a relationship between the two. So this trend line, if I get into this more trend line options, so it is asking me to plot the trend line based on this. I'll select. Okay, I'm plotting the trend line. I'm creating, I want whether a linear trend line or logarithmic trend line. Let's say I'm doing a linear trend line. We are seeing that the line is slightly increasing. The slope of the line is on an uppish trend. So at least I can make a conclusion that as the average is increasing, the strike rate also will go up and vice versa. And just if I want to display the equation, let's say my intention is to forecast the strike rate based on the average. Now I can very well ask it to display the equation. The equation is saying the strike rate is equal to 0.819 times the 0.819 times the average plus 49.32. So if I really want to predict the strike rate based on the average of the person on a typical if on an average the person is having an average of 30, what should be his approximate strike rate? Right? First of all, we need to see whether this relationship is significant enough so that I can use it for the projection purpose. This is only an equation. And this one, the display R squared, will actually talk about the strength of the relationship. The kind of a correlation that is existing between the two. It's a very pathetic value. 0.18 is a very pathetic value in this case. Unless the value is around 0.7, 0.8 or plus close to 1, I cannot take the equation for granted. So because this is 0.18, though my equation is 0.819, some equation is displayed, I cannot use it for my forecasting purpose because statistically it is not a strong enough kind of a equation to be taken. This is what we generally eliminate as a part of the hypothesis testing process. Right? If at all the R squared is very low, and of course there are few more tests which we do, but the primary scenario itself is R squared is very low, I can very well omit the equation whatever it is generating. But probably if I take the relation between two values and R squared is pretty high, let's say 0.7 or 0.8, then probably I can use this equation to do the forecasting of the strike rate for the person based on his average. But though this equation has generated, I cannot use it. So again, the same way I can format this sheet, right? All these things can be done exactly in the same way. Once the scatter plot is generated, I can very well do the formatting and all the aspects more or less in the same manner as I have done for the other types of charts. Only when we want a relationship between the two variables, that is where we depend heavily on the strike rate. Probably if I want to see in case of a stock price data, two companies stock price, I want to see what is the kind of relationship between the two companies stock price. Let's say to understand that better, let me download the stock prices of two companies. Let's say I'll take two from the same industry. So I'll take just last 1 year data. Let's say I'll take the last 1 year data of two companies. Okay. So nothing much. I have just taken for two companies. I mean, one company I have taken it as Infosys. Let me take one more. Just I would like to see as a part of my correlation or scatter plot if there is any kind of a significant relationship between the two. In some cases, that number will be very significant, whereas in some cases, it will become completely ignorable kind of stuff. In this case, I am hoping that the relation between the two should be slightly better. Okay, I'll just take only the closing price of this company and try to paste it here. So this is and try to paste it here. Alright, so I'll say this is the Infosys price and let's say this is the Wipro's price. Now I want to see whether there is any kind of a relationship between these two. So on the same day I am trying to find out the relationship between the two values for the same record. So in that case I am depending on the usage of scatter plot. So here I am going ahead with insert scatter plot, the basic scatter. Again the same stuff. Select data. I am adding. Here I am calling it as Infi versus Wipro. Then the series X, let's say I am taking Infosys values. Right, this is Infosys values I am taking. Then in the series Y, I am taking Wipro's values. Alright, so this is what I have considered for this two. Now if I am trying to plot the scatter plot between the two, yeah, at least in this case, it is showing, right, it is doing the joining activity. So just to eliminate that joining activity, I'll go with a change chart type. And I'll go with this preliminary one. Yeah. So at least in this case, it is showing that there is an uppish trend. Yeah, in this case, actually what we are seeing is the whole part of the graph is unutilized. Right? Because Excel by default is creating the scales on its own. Probably if I manually create those scales, at least this much, probably up to 300 here and up to 2000 here, there is not even a single occurrence. So if I start my graph with axis starting from 300 itself instead of starting from 0, and similarly on this side, my graph would be slightly bigger enough for analysis. So that is where, yeah. One is the Infosys prices and one is the Wipro price. X-axis I have taken as the Infosys price, the E column. Y-axis I have taken as the Wipro's price. Because I have tried to see if there is any relationship between Infosys price and Wipro price. So I am trying to, so anything on any record, one single record, I am taking two different values. and trying to observe the relationship between those two values. Like if one is going up, the second one is also going up or coming down, whatever is it. So that I can, if I know the value of one, I can try to predict for the other. If the relationship is very strong, so probably you may say sales of your competitor versus your sales. If your sales of the competitor is growing, I may say my sales also can go up because both of them are positively correlated. Or probably the strength of the economy versus the sales of a company. If the economy is doing good, the sales of the company will go up and vice versa. In those cases, I can very well think of going for a scatter plot. The relationship, if I want to find out whether there can be any kind of a solid relationship between two or more variables, I can depend on going for a scatter plot here. So at least I want to remove this scale 300 to 2000. I want to remove it off. So that's where what I can do is I'll get into the layout tab, get into this axis, horizontal axis as well as vertical axis. For each of them, I'll display the axis. I'll go with the more options on this axis, where the default scenario is minimum and the maximum values are auto. They are generated automatically. Rather than that, I'll fix them. So let's say in this case, because I'm talking about the horizontal axis, I'll say that the minimum value is 2000. So you see the graph actually started expanding, and the maximum value also, depending on wherever it has gone, it did not cross 3000 much. So I can very well set that the maximum value is also around 3000. At least I'll see a good spread, right? And major unit and minor unit I can still omit it, let it decide automatically. The same way I can do it even on the y-axis. So primary vertical axis, even this one I'll get into this options. Instead of setting it to a minimum, I'll set probably the fixed value minimum. I'll put it at 300. Now you see that the graph is more or less occupied well in the entire space. And even the maximum probably I can leave it as it is, because mostly up to the top it is utilized itself. So now with this, so this chart is looking much more better. And if I have to see the relationship between these two variables, I can go with a trend line and go with a linear trend line, which is looking very much in the uppish side. Just to check it out, I'll display the equation on the chart. 0.096x plus 139 something, that is the equation. And I would like to check out the r squared value. Slightly better, 0.35 is the r squared. Right, r squared is 0.35 or 36 itself, means correlation is around 60%. Correlation is 60, r squared is 60 square, which is 36%. So almost a 60% kind of a correlation, which is not that bad, but at the same time may not be that great also. So what we are simply trying to observe through this is, if at all the relationship is pretty strong, more than let's say r squared itself comes to 0.7 or something like that, I can very well try to derive the second one based on the first one. Right, I can forecast the second one based on the first one. That is what is the typical regression mechanism. Right, I try to find out the relationship between two or more variables. The moment I am seeing that the relationship is strong, I can very well use the one of them to forecast the other value. So that is how a scatter plot is helping us out. The equation it can derive, the r squared it can derive, and based on that, if required, we can get into the forecasting aspect using this r squared number. Right? A small extension of this scatter plot itself is the bubble chart. Instead of 2 variables, if I have 3 variables, right, just looking at 3 variables together, when variable a and b are equal to this, so a and b I'll take them on the x-axis, whereas c, for the same record I want the c also. The c I don't have a third dimension to plot, so the third dimension I'll treat it as a bubble, right? So for this combination of a and b, I'll observe the bubble as the third dimension. So let's say in this example itself, right, let's say if this is the relationship between Infosys and Wipro, on this day, instead of plotting what is the price of these two, the scatter is simply plotting the actual values at each of the location. Whereas what a bubble does is, for that intersection, what is the third value? Right? Let's say this is the Infosys stock price. This is the Wipro stock price. On that date, what is the total turnover of something? If I want such kind of an aspect, so for each of the intersection here, instead of plotting all of these points with equal dots, it will plot, the bubble chart will simply plot that bubble. The size of the bubble will clearly indicate the third dimension. The bigger the size of the bubble is, the third dimension will be much bigger, and vice versa. So I can plan out my scenario in such a way that the bubble chart also, right, I'll show you one more example where I can actually integrate the bubble chart into the spreadsheet itself, again the spreadsheet formatting, so that it looks as if it is not a bubble chart at all. It is for each of the row and column values, you have actually circled some of them, right? That will plot a bubble chart, again with our cricket example itself. For some players, for some years, I'll try to put the strike rate as a part of the bubble. Now, for this, what you typically see is the places where you are putting the bubble, it looks as if you have made a rectangular table, and within that you have plotted the circles of different sizes. So that's where you can use the bubble chart integrated with your data, right? Bubble chart integrated with your data, so that you can actually derive the real presentation output out of it. So tomorrow I'll show that bubble chart example, where of course the regular bubble we can plot on this itself, right? If I simply take a regular bubble chart, we talk about insert bubble, the only thing that comes is the third dimension comes into picture. We have just taken 2 dimensions now. The third dimension also comes into picture. If I do a select data add, so you see x, y and bubble. So up to x and y it's the same. Infi versus Wipro. Let's say I want to look at it. The series x and y will remain more or less the same. Up to here there is no difference. The bubble will really play a role when there is a third key value. So in the bubble, let's say I want to plot the number of trades or something. Let's say the number of trades, some value, right? This is what I would like to plot as a part of the bubble, which means from our logic standpoint, there are 3 elements in the record, which I am trying to find the relationship. 2 of them I will find either in the x-axis or in the y-axis. The third one I will see as a part of the size of the bubble, right? Now when I do an OK here, I have taken the number of shares traded of Infi. Now here also the scale is a problem, right? So we'll reduce the scale. We'll go to the axis, horizontal axis. I'll take only from 2000 to 3000. All right. And vertical axis also I'll take from 300. Okay. All right. Okay, so here the problem is the bubble size is going much bigger. What I can very well do is I'll right click and I say format data series, and I can very well say scale the bubble size to some number. So right now it is getting equated to 100. Now if I scale it to 10, it will show a small bubble size for me. So at least now we are seeing a few of the bubbles are pretty big. So what we can very well conclude from those things is, okay, this is the day on which the trading has happened very much, right? So I mean, if I really want to see whether more trading is happening when the stock price is high or when the stock price is low, when more, see, if I really want to conclude, is more trading happening when the stock price, is there any relationship between the stock price trading, the number of stocks traded, and the stock price? So if all the big bubbles are towards the corner, I mean on the 45-degree line, I can very well say when the number of when the stock prices of both of them are very high, then the maximum number of trading is happening, right? Or probably another better graph I'll take. I'll not bring in Wipro's price into it. I want to see, I'll try to bring in with the three elements. One of the elements I'll look at the stock price of this company. The second one I'll look at number of shares traded. And the third one I'll look at the turnover. Right? And the third one I'll look at the turnover. Between these three elements, I would like to plot a bubble chart. Okay, I'll select these three. I'll say insert a bubble chart. Now on one side, I'm seeing the stock price. On the second side, I'm seeing the shares traded. And on the third side, this bubble, I'm seeing the turnover. Okay, now again the same logic. I'm putting my axis. This time probably we can derive slightly a better conclusion. So I'm trying to plot my axis between 2000 and 3000. Okay, there are no negative values, so I don't need to go for a negative. Probably I'll say from 0 to, let's say, so much. Yeah, otherwise I'll leave it from 0 to that much number. And yeah, so this is what is my new bubble that is getting created. And if I simply go for a format data series, and size the bubble by 10%. So it will be scaled down 10 times. Now what I am observing is this is how the turnover is. So even the turnover has not too much of an impact on the stock price. So there are a few bubbles which are pretty large. They are happening both at very high prices as well as very low prices also. Right? It's not that only when the price is very high the turnover was higher or vice versa. So I can very well conclude once I plot this three element relationship, I can very well conclude whether there is any kind of, whether the size of a particular value is on the 45-degree line, which means when both of them are going up, the third dimension is also higher, or is it completely towards the vertical, which means it is only dependent on the horizontally plotted value, or is it very close to vertical, very closer to the vertically plotted value, or if it is always centered flat, then I am saying it's nowhere related to a horizontal value or a bigger value. So you can very well conclude it's like a third dimension. We can always visualize a bubble chart more like a third dimension graph, right? Instead of plotting it as another z-axis and trying to visualize this in a 3D fashion, the bubble is solving the problem for us, which is the same 2D itself, but the size of the bubble will tell us whether that value is extremely higher or on the lower side, right? We'll take a very better example from the cricket space itself to create a very good bubble chart and plot it as a part of our table itself. Whatever the names we are choosing, whatever the years we are choosing, in that space it will create a bubble for us, right?